place. So
We are live.
Okay, we're back to Senate Appropriation, January 30th. The last with the Vermont Veterans Home down in Bennington. We were had them last week about the BAA, and they're back again this week. Talked about their fiscal 27 budget. So I'll let you introduce yourselves for the record and give us your presentation.
Good afternoon. I am Melissa Jackson, the CEO of the Vermont Veterans Home, and with me is Steve McClafferty, our Finance Director. Good to see everybody again.
Yeah.
So starting on the budget development form, our total budget increase request for this year is $337,439. And obviously the budget development form is far more detailed this year than it has been in past years. I don't know if there's any specific questions on that form or if you'd just like me to dive into our PowerPoint.
Yeah, the form you're talking about, the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Yeah. What you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
What of that 31 million, how's that different? Is there a percentage different from last year?
I had that in a slide further down. Hold on. It's like, what is it?
I think it's a 1.9, under 2%.
Yes, thank you. 1.9%. Yep.
Good job.
wow.
Hard in these times to stay under that.
So the next several pages are our detailed budget, the detail report. I do just want to touch quickly on our temporary, where is it?
It's on slide 3, Melissa.
Thank you. Okay, yes, under slide 3 is under contracted and third-party services. It says temporary employed agency, and you'll notice that there is a difference there, a reduction of $2.3 million. So we have been, I shouldn't say we, all the credit goes to my director of nursing, Sarah Sigsbury. She's been actively hiring since she started in end of June, beginning of July. She's hired 16 nurses. So she's been very, very busy.
Wow.
Yeah, so we are being really optimistic in hoping that we can save this amount of money. If we're unable to meet this target, you'll see in a slide a little further on, we may be back for budget adjustment. So we're trying to be positive and really work hard to reduce our agency staff. So when you see the slide in a little bit talking about budget adjustment, I wanted to show you where it's coming from. The first thing Sarah does when she comes in the morning is signs right onto success factors and looks to see who's applied overnight, gets them in for an interview, and is working really hard to fill our positions as quickly as possible. So fingers crossed that we can meet that huge reduction, but we're trying to be very, very positive.
And you also have a decent reduction in your vacancy savings.
Yes.
You're like filling more positions.
Correct.
That's great.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully you can correct that now on how not to use the contract nurses.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We will move into our PowerPoint. So just a reminder of who we are and what we do, because we're always asked all the time. We are not the VA. We truly are an agency of the state of Vermont. And our incredible mission is to fulfill the promise, to remind our veterans that their service to the country and Vermont is not forgotten, and that our state is here for them and the Vets Home is here for them.
The slideshow starts page 21 to your 40.
Oh, on slide 22, that's the promise I'm talking about. Slide 23, just some quotes about caring for our veterans that we find important for what we do. Slide 24 talks about the history of the Veterans Home, how we became a state Veterans Home. So people ask, well, you're kind of a state agency, you're kind of not. Well, we are a state agency. My reporting is a little different in that I obviously report to a board of trustees. I am appointed by a governor. I was Governor Douglas's last appointment before he left office. But I have state employees. We follow all the same rules and regulations that all the other state agencies follow, and my employees are members of VSEA. So other than the weird reporting of myself and the fact that the board owns the land, everything else about us is a state agency.
But they're all state employees.
Yes. Yep.
That's
I'm a little perplexed here. Is it under our history?
Mm-hmm.
The bullet says our first inmate was admitted.
Oh, I know, I saw that.
Yep. So they were called inmates back then.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
That's why you put it in quotation marks.
Yes. Yep. And we still have a jail. We don't use it, but it's still here. We have all of our history, we do a lot of genealogy requests, and periodically we'll break out the matron's book, and it'll talk about how a certain veteran came back drunk again and was put in the tank. So it's very interesting, the history of things that have happened here. So moving on to slide 25, this truly explains what a state veterans home is. It's a nursing home or an assisted living / DOM, which we have here, or an adult day health center that is owned, operated, and managed by the state, which is what we are. So then we are recognized by the Veterans Administration, and we're certified as a state veterans home. So we're fortunate enough to be inspected not only by licensing and protection from the state of Vermont on behalf of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, we also are inspected annually by the Veterans Administration. So currently, there are 175 state veterans homes, and I believe there's about 4 more to come online. We're one of the few states only to have 1 veterans home. Most have 4 or more. So we care for veterans, spouses, and Gold Star parents. We have 130 beds. Obviously, we have the 30 beds offline that I've talked about in the past. Our maximum capacity is 99. We have our 8-bed domiciliary, which we call the DOM because domiciliary is a huge word. We are budgeted for 192 state employees and 50 temp employees. When I say temp employees, those are state employees that work intermittently or 24 hours or less. Those are not our agency staff. We do short-term rehab, long-term care, physical, occupational speech therapy. We have our incredible memory care program, our hospice and palliative care, respite care. Right now, we do outpatient rehab for Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance. I'm really excited that the Veterans Administration has now opened the door for us to apply to be providers for outpatient rehab for veterans in the community who are 70% or more service-connected disabled. So this is allowing us the opportunity to potentially garner more revenue without having to build any more infrastructure. So when I'm in Washington next week with all the other state veterans homes, they're going to show us how to apply. And if Tri-West, which oversees this, what they call Optum, which is the insurance for 70% or more service-connected disabled veterans, feels there's a need, we can become one of those providers. So fingers crossed that we can become an outpatient provider and start generating a little additional revenue. So
do you offer any adult day services?
We do not, because that requires a whole additional physical plant. And right now, the VA doesn't provide construction grant funding for that. It's something the National Association of State Veterans Homes, which our home is a part of, is trying to change. And actually, the daily rate for adult day health is higher than the daily rate for our domiciliary. So
would be good.
Right. Moving on to slide 27. When we met last week, I told you about this lovely award we received, and here's 3 of our staff members receiving the Silver Award in Las Vegas. Or a Silver Quality Award. This is the information on the U.S. News and World Report Award that I mentioned last week. Again, the only home in the state of Vermont to receive this for both long and short-term care. And then on page 29 is the Pinnacle graph that shows best in class. So the red line on this is the national average for all nursing homes across the state. The dark blue line is what they consider best in class. And the purple line above the blue line is where the Vermont Veterans Home lands. And the list off to the right of the graph is all of the customer service awards we achieved last year. And by achieving all these awards, we are in the top 15% of nursing homes across the country. So my staff works incredibly hard every day. The next page is
What
just
is-
some.
What is the y-axis on that graph?
It goes from you get from 0 to 5. It's a 0 to 5 rating, 5 being the highest rating that you can get.
By your tenants or your inmates?
Yes. My inmates are their families, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the next page is a summary of comments. When Pinnacle calls, they ask them various questions, then people give comments. And I especially like the first one. It says, I appreciate the fact that they walk their talk and they don't even talk about it. I know they communicate and talk with each other. It isn't just about having expensive materials. It is spending the time with them to make them feel they belong. So the private for-profit industry has the nursing homes that look like your 5-star hotels. We don't have a building that looks like our 5-star hotels. Don't get me wrong, it's well kept, but it doesn't look like a 5-star hotel. So, but we invest in the care and it being home. So I think that comment right there thumbs up who we are and what we do. So this is slide 31, where I mentioned where you would see that if we don't hit the hiring target, we might be back for a budget adjustment up to $2.2 million, but we are going to work really, really hard not to be here for that. Which is the biggest increase in our budget was our salaries and benefits, which was $2.3 million. We did see a reduction in our vacancy savings because we went from 64 open positions in FY26 to 48 in this coming fiscal year. And then obviously that resulted in an increase in our salaries and benefits. And those figures are listed there on that slide.
Are the market factor adjustments just for new hires, or do you do that?
So we had market factor adjustments. Our social workers had market factor adjustments.
For the whole, like,
Go ahead.
Dietary?
Pardon me?
it's for the whole class. It's not just for like one person.
Yeah, it was our social workers, dietary, and there was somebody else I'm forgetting.
HVAC and electrician.
Nutrition. Yes. Yep.
So that's like is that market factor adjustments like
They increased their hourly wage.
does HR do that? That's like it's different than a reclassification.
It's similar to that, but what they did is they looked at what was going on in the market compared to what our.
Do you ask for the union asked for that or something?
Our employees requested it.
No, any employee can do it?
I think the SCA has request for management and do it as well.
And our staff can as well. Yep. Makes us a little bit more competitive with the market out there.
Well, that should help with the not having to do, well, if it's in the nurses, that would help with the contract nurses.
Yes. Slide 32 gives you a breakdown of our fixed costs and those costs that we have minimal control over. And I love my food service supervisor, but he didn't come in with good news today. He came in and handed me an email explaining that Florida was hit by a huge freeze. So all of our fruits and vegetables that come from Florida are going to go up substantially. So I'm like, you're just a bearer of great news on a Friday afternoon. But I will tell you that, when it comes to my dietary department, they're looking, working with to still get high quality food, but, not spend an arm and a leg. But it's a challenge every day with those kind of things. The next slide. So this on slide 33 is just our salaries and benefits history in the past. This has been asked for, so we put it in there just so if you guys wanted to see it, you had it. And on page 34 is our general funds history. And I just wanted to point out, obviously last year was the first year that we did quote the all-in budget where we made an educated guess on what our Medicaid settlement would be, just as we did this year, where in FY25 we held that money back and came in and that was built in after. So that's why there's the big difference between FY25 and 26. The key factors of our budget request, which is on slide 35, is salaries and benefits, which is $20.2 million. Our state allocations are $1.1 million. And this is one of the things Steve and I kind of throw our hands up and like, oh, what are we going to do about that? So other agencies, if they have increases in expenses, they can kind of push them off to us. But once they get to us, we can't really pass them on to anybody else. So we have to absorb those. Our utilities and then our bed tax. And even though we have those 30 beds offline, we're still paying the bed tax on those because we're not giving up the licenses.
And what would happen for you to be able to use those beds? Is it just staffing, or is there other?
It's staffing and the need. There's some environmental issues there that we're looking to rebuild, tear that area down and rebuild it. There's some plumbing and various issues that would not make it a good environment for people to live. We do have the design work done. We've applied for a VA construction grant, which is one of the nice things about being a state veterans home. The VA will pay 65% of a project. The state would pay the 35%. The downside currently is there's over $2 billion worth of projects on this VA construction grant list. And last year, the VA was given $185 million towards those projects. Usually, big construction projects like what we're looking at are funded first, but there's no guarantee. So we've been working with BGS on design work, and we're meeting again after I come back from DC next week, where I meet with the VA on their thing. Hope to be moving forward that project very soon.
Yeah, good luck.
So little less than 33% of our budget is general funds, and then 67% comes from Medicare, Medicaid, private, and VA funds. On page 36, we're talking about the two types of funding we receive because we are a state veterans home. The first one is a basic per diem. This is paid to us for any veteran who is 70 or less than 70% service connected disabled. So it's $146.98 in the nursing home and $63.26 in the DOM. So then the remainder of the costs on the nursing home is made up by private pay, Medicare, Medicaid, long-term care insurance, and the remainder of the cost on the DOM is done via private funds. For those on the nursing home side, if they're 70% or more service-connected disabled, they get paid $567 a day, or we do. So I always tell people, everyone in a nursing home looks old and infirm, so everyone would assume that the VA pays that figure for everybody, and they don't. It has to be tied back to an illness or injury that they can relate to their time of service. And that's an all-inclusive rate, and it shows everything that is included. One of our biggest challenges right now is oral chemotherapy medications. We deny a lot of veterans admission if they're on these oral chemotherapy medications, because they can be upwards of $50,000 a month. They're very, very expensive. So unfortunately, we'll say no to a veteran because we just can't afford it. But if we have a veteran who is here and they go on these medications, we're not going to say, no, you can't have the medication, and we're not going to kick them out. So for a while, we may be at a loss. What the National Association of State Veterans Homes learned about a year and a half ago is that if a veteran is in a private for-profit home that has a contract with the Veterans Administration, and they are on these very expensive medications, the VA is reimbursing these homes for this medication. So we currently, we being NASVA, have some legislation in Congress to get the same treatment. We feel it's only fair. Congresswoman Balint has signed on as a co-sponsor. So I'm hoping this legislation will pass, because this will be a big help to us. So the legislation would be that any medication that is over 8.5% of the cost of the daily rate would be reimbursed to us. And as you can see, medications were 86% of our drug expense in FY25. So this would be a big help to us. So we will keep you up to date on that.
Yeah.
So in FY27, we anticipate receiving $8.6 million in revenue from the VA. That's on slide 38. Slide 39 goes over our reimbursement rates, and we built our budget on it.
What
Yep.
is your cost per day?
You know,
Our
Yeah.
cost, last cost report, it was about $710 per day.
Okay.
So our private room rate, and that's just the private room rate covers room and board, and then we bill, everything else gets billed separately. Is $345. Our semi-private room rate is $325. We have a board meeting coming up in 2 weeks, and we'll be presenting to the board a slight increase in the private room rate. We anticipate that room rate may only, it's a very small population that is private pay, would impact the budget less than $100,000 over the course of a fiscal year. Our Vermont Medicaid rate, so we get the interim rate, which is the $475, and then when they do the cost report, that's when we get the true up. So, and that's where that 710 came from. But that was from FY25, correct, Stephen? That was, because it's always like a couple years behind.
Yes.
Okay.
And there is the VA rates that we just talked about. So, and then we, based on the most recent Medicaid settlement, that's where we came up with the 3.7 million for the estimated Medicaid settlement. Really quickly, who's on page 40, who still lives here, or who lives here? Our average age is 81. Our youngest veteran is 55. Our oldest is 98. We have 83 veterans, including 3 females, representing all branches of service except the Space Force. We still have 1 World War II veteran with us, and then up through present day. We still face the challenges of higher acuity, especially our veterans with PTSD and dementia and substance abuse issues. On slide 41, we talk about our challenges, meeting our census goals and our financial goals with our 30 beds offline. No control over our labor costs, but this year we are included in the Pay Act, so that's some helpful news. We currently have 58 open positions, and we're hoping to continue to fill those. Continuing to face that challenge where people feel that veteran care should be free all the time. So we'll work on that. And the other thing we're up against with the federal VA is very interesting. It's been a phenomenon on the West Coast and it's slowly moving this way, is items that veterans receive in the community. When they come to a state veterans home, the VA is now pushing the cost on the state veterans home. Things such as custom wheelchairs, which can start out at $20,000 and $30,000 and go upwards to $100,000. They're saying, well, when they're in a state veterans home, the veterans home should pay for them. If there's the need for dental care, the state veterans home should pay for them. Again, NASWA, this is something we're looking at, working with both the House and Senate Federal Veterans Affairs Committee, saying, why should veterans lose these benefits that they're entitled to because they're coming with us? Why should we have to pay for things that the VA should be paying? Hasn't happened here in Vermont yet, but it's something we're watching very closely.
These outside groups or individuals are just trying to get the care and that they're not getting it from the VA. They're just saying that the veterans home should do it. And they're telling the veterans that.
Actually, the federal VA in California is telling the California State Veterans Home, so they have to pay for the stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just watching it because normally when it starts in one area of the country, it kind of rolls across the country. So we're trying to get ahead of it.
Right.
But people feel, and I'm a veteran, I should get care for free. Right, wrong, or indifferent.
Okay.
Slide 42 just gives you a quick overview of the difference between what one of our employees makes per hour versus what an agency staff member makes per hour. That information's been asked in the past, so we included that. Stephen and I and Sarah, our director of nursing, will be renegotiating these contracts very shortly and lowering the rates. A lot of the other nursing homes in the area have been successful in doing that, so we are going to do that as well. Our budget challenges, we've talked about most of these along the way. I just want to touch very quickly on the last one on the slide on page 43, which is the Medicaid 1115 waiver. Right now, this is good through December 31st of 2027. This is the waiver that gives us our actual costs and that Medicaid settlement. If for some reason it is not renewed, we will be subject to what's called the Medicare upper payment limit. So we would no longer receive that large settlement that we're receiving now. And Stephen and I have been looking to see what that Medicare upper payment limit would be. We haven't been able to get a very hard number, but we anticipate it would be an additional request of upwards of $5 to $6 million of general funds if this goes away. AHS does all of the applying and paperwork for the 1115 waiver. So any specific questions regarding that would have to go to them because I don't know the ins and outs of it. We're just the benefactor of all of their hard work. So, on page 44, some of our spending reductions. We continue to make sure our costs are in line with our daily census. We just recently did not renew our contract with our podiatrist. We have some highly skilled nurses who can do the nail trimming. And if there was something really beyond that, we were sending them out to the podiatrist anyway. So he still sees them for the more technical stuff. We're saving the money by having our nurses do the nail trimming. And then we have several other people on contract that I will be talking to Doug Pine in his office about the possibility of having them possibly be either temporary or full-time state employees at a potential cost savings to the state to see if that might be an option because their contracted cost per hour is very, very high. Our LNA class continues to be a great success. Yesterday, we had 8 LNAs graduate, and they are all coming on board either full or part-time on our second shift, which is exciting because on second shift is our highest use of agency staff.
Melissa, when you had like graduating class last year, 5 and only 2 hired, is that because after the class they decided they didn't want to do it, or did they get hired somewhere else?
Well, the first class, 3 of them went to work at another facility because one of the classmates' mom worked over there. And the second one, she went on to went to school. She's working on her LPN and hopefully will be coming back after. So.
You require them to work there to do your class, but you could give them an exception if you wanted.
So I have asked about having, like, if they don't stay with us, can there be like some, I don't want to say penalty, but when I worked in the private for-profit sector, if you did this class, you had to work for us for X amount of months. It's not something that can easily be done in this environment. Is the easiest way to explain it. I've had conversations with labor relations on that.
Okay.
And then lastly, on slide 44, we continue to do a great job with our one-on-one. It's been many years now since we've had someone who's been on continual 24/7 with someone with them. The staff does a great job of identifying when someone may be in crisis and needs someone with them for a little bit of time. So they're doing great with that. We do have a waiting list. We were really close to 90 the other day, and within 24 hours, we had 4 deaths. So but we've had 3 admissions. Matter of fact, we had one today. I have to go say hello. We have another one coming next week. So our marketing and admissions department is, even though we have a waiting list, continuing to make sure that our name is out there, making sure people don't forget about us. We're making sure that we're present at VSO events, and we're also making sure that we're available for any job fairs to recruit staff. And then the remainder of the slides talk about our community events. And a little bit more about our high school affiliations and our college affiliations. So any questions? I threw a lot at you there.
Yeah, well, I think we asked our questions as we went through. Thank you for your service to our service members. That's important. And you're doing a good job controlling the costs, it seems to me. And hopefully you can get those other beds open soon, because I know there's a need for it.
Yes.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you. I always appreciate seeing you both speak.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Good, thanks. Okay, we'll move right into the treasurer's office. They're all here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We have a presentation that we'll walk through, but please feel free to ask any questions that you have along the way. The way that
You have to introduce.
oh, sorry, Mike Pichek, State Treasurer of the state of Vermont. And the way we broke up our presentation, we have sort of our governor's recommended items that we'll go through, and then there are 2 bills that have an appropriation with them that would impact our budget. One is a treasurer's omnibus bill and has 4 funding items, and then there's a bill that Senator Lyons is helping us with in the Senate as the sponsor, that is with a RARX that has a one-time funding request as well. So we'll lay those out. All of those funding requests are not phased through general fund. They usually, most of them are coming out of our special funds for our one-time ask, but I'll get into those specifically. So just an overview of our office and our budget. The 27 governors recommend is just about $14.2 million. And to break that out a little bit about where does our revenue come from, you can see about 2.8 million comes from the general fund. 1.5 million comes from our unclaimed property fund. So we fund our operations for unclaimed property from those assets that we hold of unclaimed property. And then similarly, the retirement system funds our retirement system. So those funds come out and pay for all of our employees and contracts and other things that we need. So you can see the breakdown there, about 20% general funded, 11% from unclaimed property, and 69% from retirement system. So putting that all together, 20% general fund, 80% special fund for our budget. Looking a little bit on our team here, we have 45 positions in the treasurer's office, about 7 staff in our front office, our treasury operations division, which handles paying all of our bills, investing our money, doing our debt issuances, relationships with the credit rating agencies. There are 11 full-time staff. There's our retirement division, which again manages the VEMRs, which is the municipal retirement, the state retirement, teachers retirement, the OPEB, the healthcare for the teachers and the state employees, and then a number of other plans that are available to exempt employees as well. They have 18 staff members. Our unclaimed property division has 4 staff members. They handled $150 million in unclaimed property that we had and try to return to Vermonters. We have our own IT staff, a little bit different than other agencies. We do work with ADS, and we're on ADS systems for things like email and our files and things like that. But we do have our own staff because we do have legacy systems in our office for both retirement and unclaimed property. And then 2 staff in our economic empowerment division. So that is where our Vermont Saves program is, where our medical debt relief program is. We have a number of financial literacy programs under economic development as well. So looking into the 27 budget, you'll see that it's an increase in totality from last year of about 7%. So representing the total dollar increase of $927,000 or thereabouts. So you can see the breakdown there of those different funds and where the pressure is, about 4.4% on the general fund, 9.4% on retirement, and 11.5% on unclaimed property. Generally, the pressures that we're seeing in our budget are similar to what I'm sure you're hearing from other agencies. The COLAs, the step increases, health insurance increases for retirement, and the pensions, internal transfer increases, and some other insurance increases as well. So all of those sort of pressures. Some of the reason for why it's a little bit different when spread out among these funds. Some of the funds have more staff versus non-staff expenses. So when you have more staff, those numbers are going to go up. Some of those divisions have had larger step increases or more of their personnel getting step increases than others. And then some of them have some IT related expenses that they're picking up on their budget versus, some of the other divisions. And then the other thing I'll just mention about our office, we try to present it as cleanly as we can with, general fund, unclaimed property, retirement. But among those 45 people, some spend their time across multiple funds. So each person is sort of allocated to each of those funds just to add some complexity to it. But to make it as simple as possible, we have our divisions that are funded through their special funds, and our front office is funded through the general fund. I want to hit on a couple of things that will show up in our ups and downs that are not connected to our budget. Both the ADAC and the OPEB, for ADAC for the OPEB and for pensions, and then also our debt service. So just one point to make here on our funded ratio for our pension systems, continue to have good news this year in terms of the increased funding levels. You can see on this chart the impact that these funds had after the 2008 financial crisis. They were in pretty good financial position and dropped precipitously overnight. And then we had a decade or so where we were meeting our ADAC, we were meeting the required amounts that had to pay in, but the funded ratio continued to track down, largely because of assumptions that, were too high, and things that we're putting in, the amounts of money that we're putting in weren't actually sufficient to keep the funded ratio level or even increase. Actually was decreasing, even though we're putting everything in that the actuaries were telling us, and then some. So we made a couple of pretty significant changes in 2000 and 2002, both with moving the assumed rate of return down to 7%, which is a much
What was it before?
It was 7.5%, but in the past it had been 8%. I think they did 8.5% at one time. So, we're hitting that 7%. The BPIC is hitting that 7%.
We pick that, or do the same people that give us the ADAC give us a?
So the way that that process used to work through retirement boards, they would come up with both the assumed rate of return and then the assumed rate of return or the assumed inflation rate.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's in BPIC's purview, but BPIC does, and we also separately sort of go through our actuary and see if it's a reasonable assumption. So BPIC decides that, but it's done with the help and influence of
And they do it every
actuaries.
They do it every year. How often?
So I think it's every 3 years is the experience study that we used to have was every 5 years, and now it's every 3 years. So I think those 3 years go by fast, which was part of the point that we stay on top of these assumptions that we're making. And
A lot could change, as we found in 2008.
yeah, exactly right. And that would be, I think it's already next year is the next experience study. So with those new better assumptions, more conservative assumptions, and with the pension reforms that occurred, you now see 5 straight years of funded ratios going up. the state system at 73.2 and the teachers at 63.4. So that's the highest the state system has been in 10 years, since 2016. It's the highest the VSTERS has been, the teacher system has been since 2011.
And how's that compared to other states? I think you have that graph.
Yeah, we don't do this presentation, but we're not the worst, but we're certainly not the best. I mean, that's the kind of the simplest way to put it. But we are
Middle of
tracking.
the pack,
I'd say again.
middle of the pack, you'd say, or?
Yeah, middle low. Yeah, but we are tracking in the right direction. Yeah.
Good.
So looking at the ADEC and the OPEB numbers, you know, I wanted to pull these out because it really sort of tells two stories here. On the pension side for the ADEC, the increases are relatively mild, you know, 2.6%, 3.6%. The average of those together is about 3%. So on the pension side, the increase over last year was about 3%. And that's sort of in line with the projections from the pension reforms. We expected to see the rate of the ADEC increases slow down, and hopefully that will continue. But also we expected to see them actually, from an inflationary standpoint, become less and less as a percentage of the overall budget. So actually go down from an inflationary perspective, even though the absolute number was going up. And we're kind of starting to see that here with, you know, with inflation being around 3+%. So that side of it, of the story, I think is very solid. On the OPEB side, you can see the increases were much more considerable, 12%, and then about 25% on the teachers. So that's tens of millions of dollars, and it's a pretty dramatic jump. But of course, what that represents is the underlying cost of healthcare in Vermont and elsewhere. Pharmaceutical costs, hospital costs, specialty costs, all of those things are going up in this environment and are just another way that healthcare shows up on the state budget. And increased OPEB costs. One thing I want to call out, because it's the great work of our retirement team, you know, that teacher OPEB is up 25%. It's a significant number of, you know, tens of millions of dollars. But, you know, in July, we had gotten a rate renewal offer from Blue Cross Blue Shield of 50%, 50% from last year to this year. We were kind of stuck. We didn't have a lot of time to determine if we had alternatives. But our team did go to work and, you know, sort of did a lot of due diligence on trying to find some alternatives for us. We did come up with a couple, and one which was called HealthSpring, a pretty significant Medicare Advantage provider across the country. They were very strong financially. They were very well rated from CMS, from the federal CMS regulators. They had a really good reimbursement rate. They had good record on their customer service. They had similar benefit structure, same benefits, same access. And their rate offered to us was 60.8%. So it saved us. Eventually, we decided to move in that direction. You know, it's a big deal to change carriers. You know, a lot of the retired teachers are obviously very concerned about that. But we thought, both for their pocketbook and for the state, you know, savings of about $22 million had we not made that decision. So that ADEC would have been even higher. So I really credit our retirement team for being able to find an alternative, be able to do the due diligence, be able to do the contracting in such a short, limited amount of time. But it's an example of, we'll give you a little bit because we do have a request for a position in our retirement division, but it just gives you a sense of the work that they're able to do and the savings that they're able to bring when they're fully resourced. The other thing I just want to hit on that is in our budget, but again, not necessarily in our office is budget, but you'll see it in our ups and downs, is the debt service. So we, when we issue debt, we have an expense of about $645,000 that will show up in our ups and downs. And then you'll see here the interest and principal that we're paying on our outstanding bonds. So about 75.7 million fiscal year 26, 77.7 million fiscal year 27. And you see the breakdown of the difference between the interest and the principal on that. One thing I'll just call out, we just did a refinancing for some of our bonds back in December. And we were able to save about $2.2 million net present value of interest on payments that we refinanced.
What is our total debt?
The total debt right now,
Yeah.
It's about 600 million in that ballpark. So I think it might just be a touch under that, but it's in that ballpark. So one of the things when we were thinking about sort of our relationship with the rating agencies and how they view Vermont from a broad perspective, you know, 600 million is obviously a big number, but our unfunded pension liabilities are in the billions, right? So we are trying to sort of take all of that into consideration and why it's so important to make progress on the pension. So that's everything in our sort of, governor recommend 27 budget. I wanted to transfer over to our treasurer's omnibus bill. So this is starting in the House, it's in government operations. And there's 4 things that would impact appropriations. One is this mechanism to temporarily fund Vermont Saves, which I'll get into. And then there's a one-time ask for $75,000 for actuarial services for a pension task force, which I'll talk a little bit about as well. I mentioned the retirement division has a position request of 1 that would come out of the assets of the retirement system. It's not a general fund impact. And then our unclaimed property division has 2 position requests, and I'll get into the reason for that. That would come out of the unclaimed property assets, and again, not a general funded item. But on the Vermont Saves piece, just a little bit of background on Vermont Saves. It launched about a year ago, fully launched in March of 2025. As of today, we have about 5,400 accounts that are people are actually saving in, that there's money and they're saving for the future. Collectively among those accounts, it's about $5.2 million collectively saved, both on the accounts and on the amount that is collectively saved. We expect to see that continue to rise, not only just this year, but in the years ahead and the decades ahead. In just 5 years out, we are thinking, projection wise, it would be more like 20,000 savers, 20,000 accounts, and tens of millions of dollars collectively saved among Vermonters. The thing that we're really excited about is this percentage here. 55% of savers are 40 years or younger. 30% of savers are under the age of 30. So really a lot of young people taking advantage of this. And I'll show the chart on the next slide in a second here that just sort of visually shows that. And then from the employers that we've been out and about talking to on the road, a lot of them really view this as a benefit for their employers, present employers, and as their employees. That a lot of their employees have talked about how they want to have a retirement system, but they weren't able to afford it. Vermont Saves is a no-cost option for the employer. It's actually required to sign up for it if they don't offer retirement. But the reason for that is because there's no cost. It's a good balance there. And their employees are seeing the benefit of it.
Senator Walker.
Thank you. On that program, so the funds that are automatically saved, are they invested somehow in securities or bonds or not, and if so, who is managing that?
Yeah, so the way that we set it up, and it's consistent with the other states that we've partnered with, we wanted to give savers the option, too many options, so that they didn't get sort of paralysis.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make them relatively simple. So the options that are available are like target date funds.
Okay.
So
Yep.
if you're thinking you're going to be retired in 20 years, you have a 20-year target date fund. And as you get closer to retirement, the portfolio changes and it goes from more equity to more fixed investments. So there's like a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, 40-year, that sort of thing.
Right.
And State Street and BlackRock are the 2 folks that are putting those target funds together for all of the states that are in this partnership.
Mhm. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Helpful.
And the employers can contribute.
So the employers cannot contribute. It's not because we don't want them to, but Vermont Saves was designed just like the other programs to be as low cost as possible. And it had to avoid ERISA regulation, which is some sort of federal, retirement regulation that would have added costs and audit requirements and accounting requirements. And under that scenario, an employer could contribute because it is an employer benefit. This is technically not an employer benefit. The state is providing it, not the employer. So they are able to contribute. But there is a savers credit, a savers match that's coming up next year. That is money that would be coming from the federal government to individuals saving in a qualified retirement account. So there's opportunity for additional monies to be paired with how people are saving.
And is the 5,420 about what you thought it would be after a year, or like are you on track with your projection?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll show you in the next slide, or a couple of slides, sort of where we stand financial projection wise, in terms of the account projection. When we look at some of the other states that are a year in, like Delaware, Delaware is I think maybe about twice the size of Vermont, and they had about 7,000 or 8,000 people saving. So we feel like we're doing pretty well compared to some of the other states that have recently set up this program. But we want that number. We have some strategies to get it there. We expect that number to get up to more like 20,000 once it's sort of a fully mature.
And that's what you're going to say. You need to get there for it to cover its cost.
Yeah, that's what both we need to get there, but that's also sort of our expectation as to where it will land.
Okay.
So just to show visually on the next slide, This is a little bit older data, but it just gives you a sense. This is the age band from age 18 all the way up to 80 and sort of where the savers are
It's
falling.
impressive that somebody's 82 stayed.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. But you know, you can see that sort of shift over to the younger folks. You know, a lot of those folks in their 20s and 30s, it might not be in their full-time career yet. They could be working in retail or hospitality, just not in a job that provides them savings for retirement. But by putting a few $100s away a month, you know, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars when they reach retirement age. So I think I mentioned we got a one-time appropriation in 2023 for this Vermont Saves program. It was $750,000. It gave us the authority to establish the program and to get 2 positions. We've launched the program with Colorado, Maine, Delaware, Nevada, and Minnesota. So they're part of our collaborative. It allowed us to get it up and running more quickly and with less expense than we anticipated, which was good. But at the same time, the one-time appropriation is set to be exhausted in this fiscal year. So we are expecting in the next fiscal year to have about $300,000 of program expenses. And the revenues for next year from the fees are going to be about $57,000. So it leaves a gap of about $243,000. On the next slide, you'll see sort of our projections and sort of when the program would become revenue positive. And, you know, that number comes down quite a bit each fiscal year. In total, if you add all that up, it's about another $700,000 that's needed. That is probably the appropriation that we should have asked for in 2023. The state of Maine asked for 1.5 million. That's getting them sort of to their sustainability point. The ways that the revenues will increase over the next 5 or 6 years are that we'll have more accounts, and there's an account-based revenue fee. And then as you have more accounts, you just have more assets under management because more people are saving, and the amount that they're saving is growing from investment return as well. So those are 2 primary revenue streams. The other is that this collaborative that we have among all of the states, as collectively the accounts get higher and the assets under management get higher, the shared fee that we pay to our vendor breaks toward our benefit, so we get more of that fee. So that will help us with revenue in the, let's call it years 3 and 4 and 5, because we'll get more of the fee revenue that is going to the vendor currently.
What's the current management percentage?
So I think the fee, like the account fee, is something like $26, and we get $4 of that. So the rest of the $22 goes to the.
It's just it's just a flat fee. It's not
That one-
percentage.
Yeah, that one is an annual fee that's paid quarterly, but then there's an asset under management fee that's very low. It's like 0.03%. And they get most of that. I think we get 0.6%, and then it'll be 0.8%, and then it'll be 0.01%. So the break fees sort of go up as more assets are under management or more accounts exist.
Yeah, great.
So the mechanism that we have that we propose to sort of close this gap on a temporary basis. Right now, our unclaimed property fund transfers older unclaimed property to the higher education trust fund. So if you're a property that is over 10 years old and under $100, that gets calculated by our office and transferred to the higher education trust fund. The proposal here would keep the 10 years, but move the number from $100 to $150 and propose that that money first goes to Fund Vermont Saves, and then any excess goes onto the higher education trust fund. So for example, next year, if we followed through on this, we would get about $240,000. The higher education trust fund would get $60,000. Right now, all of that money is flowing to the higher education trust fund. The reason that we picked that as the revenue stream is both because it's temporary and like it'll eventually go back in total to the higher education trust fund, and because the higher education trust fund had a significant windfall last year, about $27 million from the estate tax. So it took that fund 25 years to build up to the point that it had $30 million. And then overnight it doubled to $60 million. So they're sitting pretty in terms of, you know, what they will be getting, you know, in terms of returns over the next 5 to 6 years. And if we temporarily divert, you know, $100,000, $200,000, it won't have much impact in total on higher education trust fund. So that's sort of the overview on that piece. The other piece I wanted to mention was the one-time money for. Oh, sorry.
So in Vermont Saves, is it technically a Roth IRA that they're investing in?
Exactly right. That's what's set up for them.
So they can, if they already have a Roth IRA, and they still do it.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing they have to be mindful of is that there's a limit, no matter how many Roth IRAs you have, there's a limit to how much money you can put in per year. So if we don't know that they have another Roth IRA, we can't help them with that. They have to do it on their own. But if we, if they had two different employers in Vermont Saves, if they had two different jobs, that would actually track back to the same account. So we could watch that. The amortization task force. So everybody, hopefully, maybe nobody wants to remember the pension reform task force that was established in 2008, but what we're proposing here is to bring that task force back, a little bit slimmed down version, but for a very, very specific reason, to look at this amortization schedule. And basically why we're doing this, or why we're suggesting that this occur, the closer that we get to these pension and OPEB liabilities being fully funded, there is actually a little bit of additional budgetary risk as we get closer to those end dates. So the pensions are set to be fully funded in 2038. The OPEB is set to be fully funded in 2048. So that's a little bit longer timeline. But 2038 from a budget standpoint is actually not that many years away. This is the 27 budget. We'll soon, before we know it, be on the 28, the 29, So the fewer amount of years you have until it's set to be fully funded, if something dramatic happens, like the stock market goes down well beyond expectation, if some assumption is way out of line, you'll see your unfunded liability skyrocket in a particular year. And then we just have much fewer years to spread that over because we have this obligation to be fully funded by 2038. So you could very well end up in a scenario where you're 4 years out from being fully funded. We're tracking well, we're at 90% funded, but then we have this huge dip in the stock market and we have $1 billion of new unfunded liability that gets created overnight. And we just would have 4 years to spread that, $1 billion.
We could also just change the
Yeah.
obligations.
Well, that's what we worry about. Is like if it happens in a year where, there's budgetary pressure and you can't pay for it, then all of a sudden you might be talking about reducing benefits or cutting benefits or, and this is just we're trying to basically do it in a more, with more forethought and more intentionality about what do we want to do to address this problem. So we're not suggesting a solution here. We want the stakeholders to come together and have a task force to think about this issue and think about how do we get to either fully funded or, a very high funded ratio by 2038 without having this risk exist alongside those improvements.
And the bill describes who is on the task force.
Yeah, exactly. It would be the union members, like from the state employees and the teachers and the state police. It would be from the Secretary of Administration or somebody from the administration. The treasurer would be the chair of the task force. And expressly for this very limited focus. And the 75,000 would just help with the actuarial costs as we ask actuaries to run different scenarios depending on which direction we went. So on the omnibus bill, the other item I mentioned was unclaimed properties. So there's a physician request, actually 2 physician requests. One, both of them combined are about $214,000. The reason for these requests, you can kind of see it on the next slide if we just skip ahead one. Just our normal operations have increased dramatically in unclaimed property. We have done a lot of outreach and partnerships and that sort of thing. But unclaimed property across the board is also seeing a lot more money coming into these systems. And as times get tough, generally our unclaimed property division sees increased claims because people care a lot more about that $100 or that $200 when affordability is front of mind. But you can see our claim jump from fiscal year 24 to 25 was a 66% increase from about 19,000 claims to 31,000 claims. And we have still the same number of 4 people handling that. So all of a sudden their workload went up 66%. And we have the same volume in terms of the number of employees. Then you can see the increase also from the amount of dollars going out. So more money went back to Vermonters also. So even just from their normal operations, they're underwater. But there are some other things that we think are important for these positions too. The fraud risk, the amount of fraud that's being attempted on unclaimed property, on retirement, on anybody that pays out money is, really gone through the roof. So they need to spend more time on claims, be able to make sure we're paying the right person. We also want them to spend more time actually making sure that people that hold the money that have to turn it over to us are turning over all the money that they're supposed to and that they're doing it on the timeline that they have to. We don't really have the capacity to do that right now, because they're so focused on paying claims. So we just want to make sure that their operations continue to be solid, but that they also are able to do these other things like fraud prevention and making sure we're getting paid all the things we need to get paid for. And that in fact could bring in additional revenue into the unclaimed property division. And then just to give you a sense in terms of the revenue on the next slide, you can see the amount on the left is the amount of revenue that gets turned over to us. So that has gone up dramatically over the last decade. You know, just 5 years ago, it was about 14 million. Last year it was 25 million. That number, whether it will be higher than 25 million this year, yet to be seen, but it will be a high number. And that trend is up. And then similarly, what we end up transferring to the general fund from our unclaimed property division continues to go up. So even with these additional expenses, we anticipate the amount of the transfer to the general fund to continue to go up.
Senator Brown,
What drives that?
Which one, sorry,
The increase from, say,
that gets turned over to us?
yeah,
So it's a great question. I mean, one thing is just that, you know, if you think about 15 years ago, there are more people, like there's more people now than there were 20 or 30 years ago. So there's more opportunity for unclaimed property. There's also a much more mobile society now. So people are changing their mailing addresses with much more regularity. There are a lot more online accounts. So people, lose track of those online accounts, PayPal accounts. There's a lot of insurance proceeds that people forget about, like small, life insurance claims. So there's a whole host of reasons, but those are some of the major ones. And it's not a Vermont unique item. It's happening across the board.
it is. Yeah.
So that's sort of the unclaimed property piece. On the retirement piece, similarly, a request for one position, $141,000. I mentioned that retirement is fully funded from the retirement assets, and the stakeholders, the union members, are in favor of this request because they certainly want to make sure our retirement division is well staffed, so we're adequately responding to their members' needs and whatnot.
And just to clarify, you mean that it's funded through the interest on those funds?
For retirement?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically the earnings. I mean, if there was a year where the earnings were down, it would be paid out of the corpus, but yeah, basically out of the, the billions of dollars that exist in the retirement.
Did you ask for this position last year or just?
I think we only asked for the two unclaimed property positions last year, but this is a new request. And on the next slide, you just see the sort of where Vermont is. So compared to some of our peers, in the median across the country for retirement systems, there's one employee per 1,300 members. For systems that are similar to our size, it's one employee per 1,200 members. And in Vermont, it's one employee per 2,600 members. So we're pretty lean already. And that's good. We want to be lean. We don't want to have a lot of expense. But when something like HealthSpring and Blue Cross Blue Shield comes along and all of a sudden we have this extra work, we want to make sure we're in a position to take that on because it did result in significant savings. We want to make sure we have the ability to look ahead a little bit and anticipate other problems that we may have, IT or operational or things with the OPEB and investments. So this gives us a little bit extra capacity to make sure we're being thoughtful and having some foresight in our division. Then the last item that is a separate thing, the ARX H577. This is starting in House Healthcare, and hopefully will be over into the Senate soon. But this is a pharmacy discount card that a number of states are now participating in. So it originated in Oregon. Oregon and Washington established the program. Nevada and Arizona and Connecticut have joined the discount card program. On average, when their citizens are using this in Connecticut, for example, they're saving about 80% on generic drugs, on the cost of generic drugs at the pharmacy, and 20% on name brand drugs. And on average, that's about $200 per month for people that are saving. If you think about the different categories of people that would benefit from this, it's certainly anybody, but people that don't have insurance at all would see a lot of benefit. People that are underinsured, so they have insurance, but the deductible's really high, they would see benefit here. I think unfortunately, there's a lot of people that probably have Medicaid or Medicare, but they don't have a Part B plan. A lot of people shifted over from Medicare Advantage this past year to traditional Medicare, but not everybody knew they had to have a pharmaceutical plan. So they would benefit greatly from this. Also, there's certain drugs that might be covered or not covered by insurance or by Medicare that would be able to get a discount from this card. So I think the opportunity is quite broad in terms of who could take advantage of it and benefit from it. There's no cost to the individual to sign up for the card. There's no cost to the state to participate in the program. What we are asking for is a one-time general fund amount of $50,000 to help with marketing and outreach. The ARP of Vermont has already offered to help us with the outreach and marketing if the program gets established. So that will be a big help too. But having some of our own funds to get the card up and running and make sure people are aware of it would be critical. And that's sort of the entirety of the various of our budget, and also some of the asks that you'll see, hopefully coming from some of the other bills that we're involved with this session.
Okay. And just so the committee knows, I've asked JFO to come and give us an overview of the hiring trust fund, just so we know what that status is now, and what this current situation is. Any other questions for the treasurer? Anything else? Yes, I don't want to.
This is a little bit off topic.
Yeah.
But in the spirit of unclaimed property, so I was teaching personal finance this last year, which was great. Came to find out that there were a lot of high school students who did not claim to be exempt on their W-4s. So they're having taxes withheld, and then they're not making enough money to be required to file taxes. And so then they don't file their taxes, and then they don't get that return. Anyway, just wanted to flag that as like, again, I realize not related, but you know, the spirit of unclaimed property. There are some statistics out there about like the billions of dollars nationally that go unclaimed from the federal government because teenagers are not filing their taxes and getting their tax returns.
Yeah, no doubt.
Tax.
I've also heard those with undocumented. They don't want to file.
Oh, right.
But they should leave that there.
Our National Treasure Association has been doing a lot of work with the federal government to try to find those areas, not necessarily on the IRS, but there are two examples. One is that a lot of times people will forget about like a 401k plan. And right now that is not in our unclaimed property system. But the idea would be that you can search it in our unclaimed property system, and that we'd actually get those transferred to us from the U.S. Department of Labor. And then the other one is that treasury bonds, like people will have fully matured treasuries, but they're things that maybe they bought in 1960 and their grandparents bought it for them, and they're not even aware that they exist. So that would be the treasury giving us that data so that people can search for those.
Yeah.
I have one of those that I got when I was born.
Yeah. So
Oh, yeah.
Sitting around. I searched unclaimed property. I do it once a year when I talk to you. And so like, I better check. And I actually had one this year. It's like $30 or something. And I was like, why does this company even have it? Like it didn't. So it's to Brennan's question about why is there more? I think you're buying more online.
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
you don't really have a
resources.
relationship with this company.
Yeah.
You just bought something one time. And so, yeah, I
They
got
might not have your address, right? You know, they might not even know how to reach out to you. Yeah.
So I got $31.28 or something like that.
Nice.
Drinks on. All right, well, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
have a good weekend.